Okay. Finally, we're live. This is Red Banner Radio. It's your host, Anthony Messina, here live on YouTube streaming and on our audio stream, which is redbannerradio.radiostream123.com. Behind me is music from FM Skyline. Figured I'd give a shout out to them. We're live on our YouTube as well, and we do have a little bit of a late start. I do apologize greatly for that. But we're here. We're live. We had to set up a few things to get our audio stream working. They seem to want to change the server on us, so we had to figure that one out. Which is why, if you had an issue for the first minute or so trying to log on and listen to the show, is why the stream wasn't up. They wanted to change the server. Which I didn't know, and I didn't catch that until just a minute ago. Anyway, it is our second day of broadcasting here for Red Banner Radio. We're live Monday through Friday from 1 to 2 p.m. Okay, cool. All right. Sorry, we've just been watching a few things. Currently, Biden's actually supposed to be announcing key cabinet picks. Now, let me talk about that real fast, because I remember just yesterday, I believe we briefly mentioned here that Biden was picking a couple of absolutely terrible picks for his cabinet. One of them, sorry about that. One of them was well, let's go to the article here from NPR. They probably talk about some of them already. Yeah, we go. So, Ron Klain as Chief of Staff, Anthony Blinken as the U.S. State Department, and Alejandro Mayorkas as Secretary of the Department of Homeland Security. This goes right back to the old adage that the Democrats are the ones who would talk about we should have more female prison guards. And the reason that that's something that is joked about so much is because it's so unbelievably and almost unbearably true. Considering the fact that we're working with the Democrat Party, considering the fact that it's Biden himself as the incoming president, the best that we could hope for is that maybe he would put Bernie or Elizabeth Warren somewhere within his cabinet or his administration. And but considering the fact that Bernie worked so hard and went and sunk so low to get Biden elected, and the fact that Biden's basically like not even remotely, I don't think he's uttered his name under his breath in months. And that's simply because the fact Bernie never stood up for himself. When Bernie conceded back in March, He should have said, "Look, I have about 30 to 40% of the Democrat Party behind me." And up until that point, Biden was pretty much getting obliterated in the primaries. And considering the fact that Bernie never said anything to Biden along the lines of, "Look, I got about 30 to 40% of the base behind me. You can't win without that base. I'll concede, but if you put me in your administration somewhere, Department of Labor, I will back you up and I'll run rallies for you and I'll help you get elected." Bernie wasn't willing to play politics like that because, to be fair, and God, I do love him and I do respect him, but that's not in Bernie's nature whatsoever. It's just not. "Hey, what are we talking about today?" says Justin. Well, a few different things. Currently talking about the Biden picking his cabinet positions right now. Um, we also have a report that Janet Yellen will be head of the Treasury. Wish I could pronounce that right on the first shot. Um, I don't know too much about her. I heard on the on morning briefing on Sirius XM yesterday. We had a guest on who was talking about um, Janet Yellen, and she has been. She was actually, from my guest perspective, was the most boring pick for that position because she hasn't brought anything new to the table. I would have loved to see someone like Bernie in Secretary of Treasury position, considering some of his best positions, deal with the economy, deal with money and finances. That would have been a perfect spot for him. But no, what are we going to get from Biden's key picks today, which he's having a press conference right now about that? We're going to get nothing but neoliberal corporatists, people who will simp harder for capitalism than you could possibly imagine. They would make Donald Trump look like the socialist. And that's because these are people who, in case you didn't know, are all from Obama's administration from 2008 to 2016. These are people that Biden's worked with for all that time. And so it makes sense that he's going to pick these people because these are people that he knows. But that doesn't make it any better, not even remotely make it any better. These are people who will remind you of Eric Ham. Um, these are people who, well, I even heard Rahm Emanuel, the most conservative Democrat ever, next to Joe Manchin, senator from West Virginia, um, who are so neoliberal and so out of touch with what the American people want. And that's why I kind of laugh when, and I still think it's worth fighting for to try and potentially push Biden to the left. But when he's announcing these cabinet picks, Janet Yellen, um, Ron Klain, Anthony Blinken. Anthony Blinken was one of the people who supported and pushed for the Iraqi war harder than you could ever possibly imagine. And it really goes to show. I mean, you have to remember that Biden was the strongest supporter of the Iraqi war, at least on the Democrat side, where most Democrats were supporting it, but Biden was going above and beyond to show his support for that. Um, let's check some comments here. I think Bernie should be put in Secretary of Labor, but I know Bernie is going to get screwed again. Oh, he is. What do you think about how this is just not a Wall Street, but also a Silicon Valley administration? That's interesting because I've heard that, and I absolutely believe that that's what we're transitioning to. Not even just for a Democrat administration, but also for later down the road if there's a Republican administration. We're not only going to see a combination of Wall Street and the military-industrial complex and big pharma, but Silicon Valley is very much so going to become a key player in terms of White House politics. And the reason for that is because they control the narrative. Silicon Valley is where the home of media is now. It's no longer just, individually owned radio stations and TV stations, and locally owned newspapers. It's Silicon Valley, where you have YouTube and Google, and Apple, all right there, and that's pretty much where all the internet goes to. I mean, obviously you have data farms and then yada yada yada, your internet service providers, but that is where Google is. All right, so that's where the narrative is, and you want to have those people in your back pocket, and that's terrifying. Because imagine when we get to a time and place in this country and in our politics where the amount of information that's going to now be controlled by the government, and I say that because you can certainly get people who, work in Silicon Valley, you give them a position in government somewhere, maybe, I don't know, secretary of, I mean, at this point, you can basically put them anywhere. Secretary of Education, and you give them that position because you did something for them. Now you got to do um, something else to keep them in your back pocket, and there you go. And now all of a sudden, now you have Google literally making laws in this country. And that also goes back to net neutrality a few years ago with the GPI, that scumbag. So we're really entering scary times here. Not only that, this comes just after the General Services Administration, which basically deals with presidential, goings on, formally ascertained his victory over President Trump. Emily Murphy, the head of the GSA, announced that Donald Trump is formally conceding, and they will begin the transition to a Biden administration. Donald Trump's tweet said, "I want to thank Emily Murphy at GSA for her steadfast dedication and loyalty to our country." What that means is loyalty to him. She has been harassed, threatened, and abused. I doubt any of that has happened, and I do not want to see this happen to her family, yada, yada, yada. Our case strongly continues. We will keep up the good fight, and, he's on his way. So, actually, I said yesterday on our pilot episode of Red Banner Radio that we will talk about, my feelings on Joe Biden and exactly what, from a Marxist perspective, I have to complain about. That's a lot. So let's start with number one. Number one is that, make no bones about it, Joe Biden is as right wing as they come. I wouldn't call him far right, but I certainly wouldn't say he's even remotely center left. He's a neoliberal. He's a war hawk. He's in the hands of the military-industrial complex. He's a Republican. He really is. I guarantee you. If we were in any other country, this is what Ocasio-Cortez once said. If we were in any other country, she and Joe Biden would not be in the same party. Because AOC, for her flaws, and there are many, but she is actually a left winger, and Joe Biden is 1,000% a Republican, moderate conservative. He's a moderate conservative Democrat, which is basically as centrist as you'll get in this country, because there are no real just down the line centrists. Joe Biden's basically as centrist as they come in American politics. So, what are some of the things that I would hope for to see out of a Joe Biden administration? Getting us back in the Paris Climate Accords, getting us back in the Iran nuclear deal, instituting a $15 minimum wage across the board federally, and slightly higher taxes on the rich. Now, I think we're going to probably get all, four of those positions. But that's going to be in the first week of his administration. That's going to be the best week of his administration. And then that's it. And then the next 3.5 years of his administration is just going to be kind of sitting there. Um, and people will be, you're going to have your liberal aunt and liberal whoever um, going back out to brunch now. Oh, if Hillary was here, we'd all be at brunch. That's the fucking problem, you dipshit. But the problem is, you think that it's all hunky dory and it's over once you get a Democrat in office. You're the same fucking lying son of a bitch who would put Black Lives Matter in your Twitter bio, donate maybe one time to a charity, to a black charity. And that's great, but then that's it for you. Then you and your liberal girlfriends go out to brunch, go out to a wine tasting, okay? Where black and brown people keep getting pulled over every single day in this country simply for being black. And now all of a sudden you might dare have the audacity to say that you're an ally. That's what Biden's administration is gonna be. They're gonna do a few good things in the very first week or maybe month. And then the rest of the time, it's just gonna be basically them saying, "Hey, at least we're not Donald Trump." And yeah, sure, at least you're not Donald Trump. But I would have voted for the ham sandwich. I don't you know we're never going to actually get real change in this country until the left unites and we start running people and we start getting what we want. And I think that there's a few different prongs to this revolution. And I think some of it is electoral politics. Um, I think a lot of it is ground team and ground game, um, where you're on the streets and you're protesting and you're rioting and you're basically committing what I would call direct action, or and I wouldn't even say civil disobedience, because really, quite honestly, this can't be civil. This has to be done with gloves completely off and making it known that until we get Medicare for all, until we get a Green New Deal, until we get universal free college, until we get a universal basic income, until we get a jobs guarantee, until we pull out of all the wars, send every troop back home, close every fucking base we have, and cut the military budget in half and invest that into communities and infrastructure, you'll never hear the end of this. We will never shut up, because we certainly can't, even for a minute, think that we're going to push Biden to the left. This has to be completely done by real leftists, real anti-capitalists in this country. And that's why I said yesterday, that's the whole reason this show exists, is because we can't have division amongst ourselves on the left. And now I get it. I'm not blaming us, because I'm just as guilty as you or anyone else on the left, talking about the division, talk about, oh, well, he's a Marxist Leninist, or oh, he's a Maoist, or he's a Democratic Socialist, or whatever. But if we're going to fight this, this system, this entire government, we can't go in with a fractured army where some of it's over here, these guys over here are kind of injured and on reserve, these guys over here are doing their own thing. We're not going to win. We're not going to win. So, basically, I've heard a few fears from a few friends of mine, a few comrades. One of them is a incredible leader of an organization that I've worked with before called the Youth Eco Socialists. They are a part of the Green Party of New Jersey. They're a youth caucus, youth wing of the Green Party in New Jersey, and the co-chair is a good friend of mine and a very intelligent person, who I do respect. We've had some differences, some disagreements, but overall, I do think he is a his heart's in the right place. I feel a little misled, but um, he did make one, I think, very good point, which is that once Biden gets elected, all of your liberals and even so-called leftists now are going to completely give up and kind of just fall back on old politics once Biden gets in because hey, at least Trump's out of office. So you basically had Trump being um the thing that kept people becoming more radicalized and more energized because of just how awful he is. And then once you get Biden in there, it's like, oh, okay, well, that energy kind of goes away because he's not really saying anything crazy. He's just kind of doing his own, thing. And we kind of know what to expect. We're expecting Obama Biden era politics. What are Obama Biden era politics? Well, let me remind you, endless wars, the most drone striking out of an administration since Vietnam, the most deportations ever, and the one good thing that Trump said during the debate a few weeks ago back in October. Who built the cages, Joe? That was by far the best line out of Trump's mouth. Now, don't get me wrong. Don't get him wrong. Trump doesn't fucking care. He just knows that's a good zinger, and he's right. It is. Because let me remind you, Joe and Barack built the cages. The policy of locking kids up in those cages and the family separation was 1000% an Obama Biden era policy. And yet you have the same liberals and leftists simping for this fucking guy simply because he's not the orange man. I hate Trump just as much as you or anyone else, believe me. But let's not get it mixed up for a minute. Biden is evil in his own right, and has supported horrible policies. The thing that should have been the completely the factor that would totally turn anyone off of him is the fact that he fully supported the Iraqi war. That should be the end of discussion. Oh, he supported the Iraq war, he's out. That's it. It's that fucking simple. If you supported that war, you should be laughed out of the fucking room and feel so shameful for yourself that you never enter politics again. Open up a fucking hot dog stand in Brooklyn. Do anything else other than politics, because you obviously don't have a fucking brain between your ears, or the only thing you do have is a very open, fat wallet from the military industrial complex because he didn't have enough cars. And he said, well, so what if a few thousand brown people die from our drone strikes in a completely fake fucking war that would make Vietnam look shameful. So that's where we're at. Um, it is yeah. Basically, the idea of you're gonna push Biden to the left is a hopeless cause. I think it's worth trying because if he maybe announces at this press conference today, if he maybe announces a somewhat progressive individual, that you might get more concessions out of him. Maybe you can pull more troops back home. Um, so I wouldn't completely toss it out as a fruitless idea. But I would really much rather us, and I think we're already really doing that, especially once we have Black Friday coming up, which I will talk about soon. Um, perhaps perhaps we can get more concessions out of the Biden administration. But the thing that we need to be doing the most as anti-capitalists in this country is organizing and agitating the fuck out of every politician for the next 4 years, and even more so. Um, I do want to talk about two other things before our show ends for today, but I'm going to get to this next story here. This comes to us from leftvoice.org. This is about Governor Cuomo's pay cut. This is an interesting article. Okay, sorry. Written by James Dennis Hoff. And I think, and let me know in the chat here on the YouTube stream, and also let me know if you're listening live on our online audio stream, which seems to be a little bit quieter than it should be right now. We'll have to uh, check that out and see exactly what's going on. But anyway, let me know if you want me to post the links to the articles that I discuss on the show on our Twitter, which again is at Red Banner Radio, so that you can kind of have a reference to what I've talked about. Also, don't forget that we are on Spotify now, so you can listen to the full show in case you missed it live. And you can subscribe to that. You'll get the feed, and everything will be fine and dandy. We might have to check out exactly what we're doing with that because basically it's an hour-long show, so it's already a pretty large audio file. And we have to host it on SoundCloud, and then that's how Spotify gets the podcast, and then that's how it gets to you. But I think we're gonna run out of room on SoundCloud because it's like a free account, and I don't have any money. And so we might have to soon beg for donations for that if you want the podcast to continue. But anyway, all bourgeoisie. I'm sorry, I already mispronounced. All bourgeois politicians are cynical manipulators of public perception, but New York State Governor Andrew Cuomo is a master of the genre. Since the coronavirus pandemic began in March, Cuomo has tried to sell himself as a tough, no-nonsense advocate of public health and shared sacrifice, but he is still the same run-of-the-mill neoliberal that he always has been. In a move that smacks of rank hypocrisy and condescension, Governor Cuomo announced Wednesday, in the midst of a televised coronavirus briefing, that he would be foregoing his scheduled $25,000 raise for next year. Oh, how nice of you, Andrew. Oh, wow. Oh, this man is sacrificing so much. So, did you hear that, guys? Did you hear that? The governor is foregoing his 25 grand raise. Wow. Give this man a medal. In fact, not only that, give this man put him into sainthood. Put him into sainthood. I think we just found the next pope. The decision comes after several conservative outlets, including the New York Post and Fox News, condemned the governor's expected pay increase in the face of a growing state deficit. As they should. As they should. I'm not saying that Fox News and the New York Post are bastions of true journalism here, but that is something that they got absolutely right. The fact that this man was going to originally take a $25,000 pay increase during the fucking pandemic when half the people in New York City alone can't afford rent or are food insecure, and this motherfucker is going to go over here and take a pay increase? Cuomo, who has a net worth, and let me remind you, of almost $5 million, who currently earns 225 grand a year, one of the highest governor salaries in the country, did not mention the criticism, but said that he and members of his cabinet would not be receiving their raises because of the, quote, overall financial picture, end quote, created by the coronavirus pandemic. Let me remind you, this is the same governor who, during the mass protests and demonstrations in New York City over the summer, applauded the actions of the New York City police, the NYPD, who were committing acts of untold brutality on innocent protesters, and who are the same police department who just last month there was a video that surfaced of some of their protesters some of their police, chanting Trump 2020, which is highly illegal for a police officer to endorse or publicly endorse or discuss a presidential candidate, a politician in general. They're supposed to be apolitical. They're supposed to not kill people too, but you know, it's America. So this is that same governor, the same liberal saint that MSNBC and CNN. They can't get enough of Andy Cuomo whatsoever. They fucking love this guy. They fucking love him. Um, so much so that I seriously think he is going to run for president in 2020, 2024. I am willing to bet this house that Andrew Cuomo is going to make a bid to run for the presidency. I don't know if he's going to win. I can't go that far, but I do think he's at least going to throw his hat in the ring. I wonder where that saying came from. Throw his hat in the ring. There must have been a time. Must have been at least one time in history when um must have been a boxing match and some dude literally threw his hat in the ring. I don't know. Yeah. Of course, foregoing these raises will have practically zero impact on the state's expected $14 billion budget shortfall. It will, however, help him deflect attention away from his brutal attacks on the working class and his record of ruthless austerity. By taking a voluntary pay deferral, he also once again gets to sell the self-serving and corrosive narrative that, quote, we are all in this together. Oh, guys, we're all in this together. Fuck, no, we're not. You know you're not, Cuomo. You're not. He gets to pretend that he and those like him, the wealthy and politically powerful, are somehow sharing in the economic pain and suffering that his own administration helped create. Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed, because he dragged his goddamn feet for the first couple weeks of the pandemic, which is what helped cause New York City to completely turn into a ghost town back in April. You remember those chilling videos of the live webcams inside Times Square where it was high noon in New York City and there wasn't a single person walking in Times Square because he refused to initiate a mask mandate. And not only that, he pretty much refused to cut all the rent, even though eventually, thanks to the amazing work of our comrades at the Party for Socialism and Liberation, the New York City wing of the party, um, was out there protesting day in and day out, saying, "Hey, asshole! If we can't go to work because we have to stay at home because you fucked up the response to the coronavirus pandemic." Now what that means is we aren't earning any money. All the money that we do have, we're spending right now on food and other necessities and supplies to be able to stay at home, to not die from the pandemic. You need to stop all the rents and you need to pay us to stay at home. And this is something that happened just a few days ago. Alexandria Ocasio Cortez, Congresswoman from the Bronx, from New York City, uh, made a post on Twitter. I said made a post because I'm an old Facebook head. I started Facebook in 2009. But anyway, she was talking about how because the pandemic's worsening, as I'm sure you know, we literally had the highest number of deaths ever recorded from the pandemic just a few days ago, with over 1,900 dead. And she said we need a new stimulus, yes, and we need to pay people to stay at home, yes. And Nikki Haley, that fucking idiot, former South Carolina governor, and I believe she was I believe she was our representative for the UN. Don't quote me on that, but I think she had something to do with the UN. She was trying to score some brownie points with the Republicans, and she was like, "Oh, Alexandria, I could probably pull it up because I know my brain's going all over the place here, but that's kind of the way the show's gonna go, as if you can't tell already." It was so fucking funny because Nikki Haley really thought, really thought that she was going to score some brownie points here, that she was gonna like out Ocasio Cortez as some radical liberal. Here we go. Nikki Haley, in all of her wisdom, thought this was gonna be a real zinger. AOC, are you suggesting that you want to pay people to stay at home from the money you take by defunding the police? Or was that for the student debts you wanted to pay off for the Green New Deal or Medicare for all? Wow. Wow. You thought that was going to work? So here we go. AOC, I'll praise her when she does something good. I'll condemn her when she does something bad, which happens. But here we go. She said, Nikki, I'm suggesting Republicans find the spine to stand up to their corporate donors and vote for the same measures they did in March, except without the Wall Street bailout this time. And I know you're confused about actual governance, but police budgets are municipal, not federal. So, no, even if we did defund the police, which I support the abolition of the police, but even if we did defund the police, that money wouldn't come from a federal budget because they're not a federal agency. She continues, utterly embarrassing that this woman was a governor and still doesn't have a grasp on public investment. Wonder if she says federal financing works like a piggy bank and household too. All this faux seriousness from folks who worship Trump for running this country like he did his casino. Oh my God. And just take a step back real fast and realize that Nikki Haley is trying to act as if a Green New Deal and Medicare for all are bad ideas. I'm sorry, but I'm so goddamn sick and tired of anyone, right or left, because there are people, plenty of people within the Democrat Party, like that fucking idiot John Ossoff, who thinks he's gonna win the senator race in Georgia. We'll talk about that tomorrow on the program. Um, she said stuff that sounds awesome, but said it like an insult. Yeah. No, I'm perfectly fine with AOC insulting people. I want gloves off politicians all around. I want these motherfuckers out there making Republicans cry. Okay? I'm sick and tired of politicians acting like they have to act nice. Yes, sir. You know, like as if they're above us. Curse a little while. Curse a little bit. It makes you feel good. Believe me, I curse all the time. But the Green New Deal and Medicare for All are some of the most popular positions in the country right now. 51% of Republicans in one of the polls conducted last month support Medicare for All. 51% of Republicans. Overall in the country, it's around 75 to 80% support Medicare for all. The idea of we're going to give everyone health care. You really have to play some mental gymnastics to make that sound bad. And of course, don't get me wrong. You know, of course, you know, we would have to have a revolution in this country for that to happen. And I think that's a shame. But there would probably have to be bloodshed over getting Medicare for all because of how in bed with our government Big Pharma is. These companies making the coronavirus vaccine right now, it's amazing feats of science. Don't get me wrong. But the only reason this is happening is because they're in bed with our government. Because that's how tightly controlled things are. So, anyway, that was from Governor Cuomo's pay cut is a cynical publicity stunt from Left Voice, and it's absolutely true. It's absolutely true. The fact that this man honestly thinks that by him saying, "Oh, I'm not going to take my $25,000 raise next year," the fact that he said that as if it was supposed to be an act of humility. Meanwhile, he seems to wonderfully forget the fact that people in his own goddamn city, New York City. Well, of course, he's the governor of the whole state, but New York City is basically his focus. Can't pay their rent because they can't get a job because of the coronavirus ruining our economy. And we're going to have almost 50% of all renters and homeowners by next year not being able to afford anything. They're going to lose their homes. You know, we're on the verge of the most intense homelessness crisis this country will have ever faced since the Great Depression, if not worse than that, because the population's increased. That never gets talked about. We're on the verge of the largest homelessness crisis in this country's history because people can't pay their rents or their mortgages because the economy is in shambles because of a pandemic, because we have a government that's basically as useful as a fucking rock. Because bitch McConnell, that fucking swine, I hate him far more than I hate Trump. I would love to see that man get the shit kicked out of him. He's a horrible, horrible, horrible human being. And he refuses to pass any stimulus bill that has any Democrat on it at all. That's how fucking partisan that motherfucker is. We have this homelessness crisis, which we're about to hit. And Andrew Cuomo feels it necessary to say, oh, look at me, guys. Look how much of a saint I am. I'm not taking a pay raise. Wow. Most of the people who work in your state would love to get a $25,000 pay increase next year. But, they can't because they don't have a job, because they lost it because of the pandemic, which you mishandled. And now, most of these people aren't going to have a place to stay soon. Or sooner rather than later. It's absolutely terrifying what we're about to have happen in this country. And I don't mean to sound sensationalistic or whatever, but this is the news. That's just the way it is. So let me see here what we want to do for the last story of the show. And like I said, we're gonna definitely figure out the format and formula a little. You know, the first few weeks of the show are going to be the probably the worst. Where we figure out the format, we figure out what works, what doesn't work, what we need to change, what doesn't need to change, things like that. And yeah, so oh, that's interesting. Let's read this one here. This is actually also about the coronavirus vaccine, which I did just bring up from Pfizer and Moderna, I believe, was another one of the companies who produced it. This is also from Left Voice. It's called Capitalist Competition is Sabotaging the Race for a Vaccine. This was written yesterday by Luigi Morris. The global race for a COVID 19 vaccine appears to be in its final leg. The research is publicly funded, but Big Pharma stands to make enormous profits at the expense of people the world over. As COVID 19 continues to spread across the globe, more than 200 vaccines are being developed worldwide against the virus. 12 are in phase 3, where they are tested with humans, and 6 are already approved for early or limited use. Millions of people are following the development of these vaccines with the hope they will put an end to the pandemic that has killed so many and halted everyone's lives. Capitalist governments are desperate to develop a vaccine because the sooner a vaccine is ready, the sooner baseline exploitation under capitalism can return. The America First approach was and still is trying to guarantee priority access for the United States, while other nations bid against each other for the vaccine and the equipment necessary to store it. Rather than developing a global solution, through cooperation. This is not only the lack of this is not only about the lack of coordination, but also U.S. sanctions against countries such as Iran that continued just when they were hit hard by the pandemic. This shows that saving lives is not the driver behind all these efforts, and that's absolutely true. You see, there was an article that was recently published about just how badly our healthcare system screws us. Over the last 10 years, hospital profits have risen by 401%. For every $100 in costs, hospitals upcharge about $417 just so that they make that much in profits. Kyle Kalinske over at Secular Talk actually talked about that very news article, and I highly recommend you watch that too. Actually, just to educate yourself more on how badly we're getting fucked by our healthcare system, which is the absolute bottom of the barrel, worst in all the Western developed capitalist nations. We're 11 out of 11 out of countries researched for that topic, including Canada, the UK, France, Germany, Sweden, Norway, yada yada yada. We're dead last, dead last. And do you know how much they're gonna probably ask to charge us for the COVID-19 vaccine? I don't even want to think about that. It's going to be hundreds, if not thousands of dollars, especially if you're not insured. Good luck. Good luck. And remember the fact that someone like Martin Shkreli, if you remember that prick, how much he was able to charge for the EpiPen that he owned, that he got the rights to, he raised it up by I think 1,000% or something like that. Just because he could, because hey, it's capitalism, right? Of course, he wound up not getting away with it. But I don't think he's sitting in jail right now. I'm sure he's a free man. You can get away with this stuff in this country, but which country sends the most amount of doctors around the world to fight the COVID-19 virus, to fight Ebola, to fight HIV and AIDS? That would be Cuba and the Cuban Medical Brigade, which have won awards around the world for their healthcare work, for their absolute selflessness, for going around the world into the worst places and doing the work that needs to be done. Because Cuba is a socialist country which puts the needs of the greater good over profits and selfishness, for lack of a better word. That's what they do. That's what they do. But here in America, nope, not at all. Not at all. So here we go. Other nations rushed into this race. The Chinese pharmaceutical company CanSino Biologics has a vaccine candidate that is in phase 3, but has limited use among the Chinese military and is in its late stage trials in Mexico, Saudi Arabia, Pakistan, and Russia. The same is true for Sinovac Biotech's vaccine, which is being used with high-risk workers in China and is undergoing phase 3 trials in Indonesia, Turkey, and Brazil, where they resumed after a controversial case. The state-owned Chinese company Sinopharm has been using two different inactivated virus vaccines on a limited basis in the United Arab Emirates and is doing trials in other countries. It's interesting to see what China is doing because, of course, they were the hub of the coronavirus months and months and months ago, and everyone was on this anti-China bent for a while, as if they somehow created it and that it's their fault. It's not their fault. This is a virus doesn't belong to a single country. And of course, Trump takes all the credit and he says, "Oh well, I locked up the borders against China and all this yada yada yada." So this race is not only about corporate profits, but also about the geopolitical, benefits that come with being the first country to create a vaccine. It is no surprise that the same countries that dominate the world geopolitically, like the US, Germany, Russia, the UK, and China, are the main countries in the current vaccine race. In these countries, as in most others, scientific research receives state funding, but the resulting profits end up in private hands. For example, the Bayh-Dole Act allows U.S. universities to sell patents on discoveries funded by tax dollars. A closer look at the U.S. reveals the vast amounts of resources governments are putting into this vaccine race. Operation Warp Speed, a Trump administration initiative, already reached an agreement with Moderna, and on August 11th, the Department of Health and Human Services announced up to $1.5 billion to fund support the large scale manufacturing and delivery of Moderna's investigational vaccine candidate in exchange for $100 million. I mean, 100 million doses. Sorry. That came on top of earlier supports to the tune of $483 million and $472 million. And of course, the countries that are not going to receive this vaccine for a very long time, if ever, are the global south countries. And that never gets discussed. That never gets discussed. But here's the funniest thing, some of them don't even actually probably need it. Countries like Vietnam, supposedly communist countries, completely controlled the virus. They had less than or maybe just around 1,000 deaths, and that's it. And they're open, and they're working, and they're doing fine. But still, so much of the global south is completely left out of this vaccine, or not even discussed about what's going on and how they're suffering from the coronavirus. And it's our job as Marxists, as socialists and communists, to bring up these topics, to talk about the global south and how they continuously get screwed in the global capitalist system. And we're seeing it yet again here with this coronavirus vaccine. They're left out of the research. They're left out of getting the vaccines in the first place, and they're probably not even going to have a seat at the table to discuss how they could possibly get the vaccine. Because the way the global capitalist system works is the global north, which are us and Canada and the UK and Western capitalist democracies, are the big guys on the block, the geopolitically important countries, Russia, China, the big ones. They do all they find they create the vaccines, and then they sell it to each other for enormous profits, where the global south are the ones who help get the resources, the natural resources, to produce the vaccines. They do the labor to produce the vaccines, and then they're left out of it entirely. Maybe they get a few crumbs. It's kind of like trickle down economics somewhat. But not even with the vaccine, with everything, with all the natural resources that are in this laptop, this mic, my iPhone, all of that has natural resources or parts or labor that are produced in global south countries. And they're also the ones in the most conflicts, war conflicts, violent conflicts, um, because of U.S. involvement in destabilizing those regions to protect the oil that we went to steal from these other countries. It's absolutely disgusting what goes on. And we know for a fact that that happens. That's just the way this works. That's the way it works. Instead of when we have an opportunity right now, we have an opportunity right now for global cooperation with this coronavirus vaccine. We have an opportunity right now to do two things that have to be done. Medicare for all, that is completely fucking non negotiable. and that the vaccine should be entirely free for anyone. Do you live here? Do you walk on two legs? Here, that's it. No questions asked. But no, capitalists have to put a fucking dollar sign on every goddamn thing in the world. They have to take advantage of a fucking pandemic, the likes of which we've never seen in modern times, and put a dollar sign on it because, God forbid, they don't get their fucking profits. And then you wonder why people are more and more and more interested in socialism. Because this is fucking inhumane. This is inhumane. Cori Bush, the recently elected congresswoman from Missouri, who outstated a fucking useless Democrat who should have been gone in the grave years ago, has said on Twitter time and time and time again, the coronavirus vaccine must be free and available for anyone. And I give her so much credit because she's putting herself at so much risk as a Democrat Party politician to say something that is right. The Democrats don't like to say things that are right. The Republicans neither. But the fact that she's out there actually speaking truth to power and saying that, I give her immense credit for it. Because that means that the head honchos of the Democrat Party, the Nancy Pelosi's and the Chuck Schumers, the useless paperweights, basically, are not going to like to play nice with her now. They hate her fucking guts because she's saying things that are popular, and that people want to hear, rather than Nancy Pelosi talking out of her ass. So, but yes, that's what we're going on about here, and it's something I will continuously talk about until I'm blue in the face. We need this coronavirus vaccine to be free, available to anyone, and at the same time, we absolutely need Medicare for all. I will keep talking about this because it is the easiest thing for us to win as socialists and communists in this country. It's the most popular position we can take. And if we want to win and if we want to initiate a socialist revolution in this country, Medicare for all is a very good way to start that. That's been Red Banner Radio for today, Tuesday, November 24th, 2020. It's been a pleasure with you again. I am your host, Anthony Messina. You can find us on Red Banner Radio at Twitter. You can also watch this live stream, which is going to be up and available for you to watch. Back in case you missed anything, the podcast version of this will be up soon as well. And until tomorrow, take care.